How's my camera? Is it good or is it too high?
No, you look good, man.
All right, man. Doing my best. Lost a few pounds.
Yeah, you look thin.
Doing my best, dude.
So get
Doing
ready
my
for
best.
Christmas.
All right. Well, we are live on Facebook. So welcome to another edition of Wealthy and Wise Wednesdays, where we share a few words of financial wisdom to help put you back in the driver's seat of your financial future. Today, we are here with a special guest, a good friend of mine, longtime friend, Brandon Perry. Brandon, thanks for joining us. How are you, man?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, man.
So I am excited to learn all about Bitcoin today. As my short advertisement earlier said, I deal in my career, in my financial planning practice, I deal mainly with paper assets, insurance, stocks, bonds, managing investment portfolios, things of that nature. But you and I talk about the financial matrix and how much the government tampers with the money supply and interferes with interest rates and things of that nature. So cryptocurrencies is it's one way to hedge against some of these manipulations. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Now, before we get into the discussion, because I am investment licensed, we have to do a little disclaimer that this conversation, it's just for educational purposes. It is not meant to be construed as specific financial advice. So anything that Brandon and I talk about for educational purposes only. So then you need to take that education and apply it specifically to your individual circumstance. And I believe I heard Orrin Woodward say that's what wisdom is.
Yep. And if I could add to that, and I wholeheartedly agree. Anytime you hear something new, right, on a topic that you're unaware about, my best advice is to always go dive more into it. I didn't start out as somebody who liked Bitcoin. I actually thought it was trash. But upon further research and whatnot, I started to kind of like it. And that's what I would recommend anybody here do. It's something bigger than you and I will be able to cover in 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably like an introduction to Bitcoin or some basics about Bitcoin. There's a lot more to learn about it, but I'm excited to learn because I know very, very little. So anybody watching this, like, it's for them. But with this particular scenario, I'm excited to learn right along with them. So where do you want to get started, man? Do you want to give like a little overview to the financial matrix? I mean, I mentioned it briefly, but like if you had to define the financial matrix and like why we're even talking about this, like what would you say?
It's probably one of the biggest scams we've witnessed in our lifetime, to me, right? Anytime you look at power, right? Power always looks to control the people. And in days of old, kings did that through slavery. But in times like now, these, in a sense, kings, right? There's actually bigger financial elites, right? Everybody always thinks like the Gates, or Jeff Bezos and stuff. There's actually more powerful financial people than these guys. And they choose, or they are controlling us through what's called the financial matrix and the manipulation of money.
Wow. So we're going to be talking about some of the ways that we can find something that has some inherent value outside of the financial matrix, outside of the manipulations of bankers and the wealthy elites and the politicians. And it's kind of interesting because like in my head, and maybe it's crazy and maybe I'm wrong, I almost think about Bitcoin in somewhat of a similar category as like gold or other precious metals. Like those things have inherent value that they're not tampered with by the government. Now, obviously, Bitcoin's not a tangible item, but the thought process is kind of similar, right?
It's very similar, So when you look at gold, and gold was, or when you even look at some of the functions of money, right? So there's three functions of money. One, a store of value, right? And this is kind of what gold was for many years, and a medium of exchange. But then the difficult thing with gold is it's not an exactly easy medium of exchange, where currency is, but it was once backed by gold. So it can at least keep inflation in check or the manipulation of, banks and governments. And then the other part is the unit of account, or how much a product or service is valued based upon, right, gold at that particular time.
Right. Okay. So how is Bitcoin similar to that then?
Well, so Bitcoin, I mean,
here we are, like in that regard.
Yeah. So here we are, we're in the information age, right? And so somehow we've got to be able to keep a better, I would say, checks and balance on basically money. Gold can easily, I think, be manipulated. And when you look at the last 12 years, nobody's been able to hack into Bitcoin or manipulate it. It is a true, math ran system, and it's actually more scarce. We'll actually run out of Bitcoin. Mathematically, you can only have 21 million. We'll actually run out of Bitcoin before we'll ever run out of gold, right? They keep mining gold on a regular basis.
I've heard about mining Bitcoin. Like, what does that exactly mean? I've heard there's people like sophisticated computer systems that can mine it, but I don't really know what that means. I'm a dummy.
That is probably actually even over my head as well.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. All right. Not a problem, man. Not a problem. Let's start here. Like, give us a little history about like what sparked Bitcoin to get started. Like, how did this even come about?
Sure. All right, well, you're going to have to go all the way back, right, to 2008, and the great financial crisis, especially here in the United States. So remember, all right, I'm formerly in a building trade, and so I remember, right, you're building houses right on top of each other, left and right, and houses worth 200, 250, and then all of a sudden, just like that, 40,000. And nobody knew what the heck happened, right? And then obviously the government come in, and they actually bailed themselves out, right? Or the banks, right? Their partner in business in a sense. Yeah. And so what happens is there's actually a group of people who are paying attention to what's going on, and they're looking for an answer. And how do we get out of this fiat controlled system? How do we actually, in a sense, it's, rebellious or revolutionary in a sense. How do we rip the money system away from governments and banks who are actually controlling us and manipulating us, and in a sense, screwing us, right? So, when all that happened, these people lost their houses, right? And people were looking for places to leave or live. You're going through depression and stuff like that. Well, did banks and governments suffer for their crime? Did anybody go to jail for that?
Yeah, no. Exactly.
But yet men had to come home and tell their wives and kids, like, hey, sorry, we blew it, and we need to go live with mom and dad.
Right.
So that kind of sparked, Bitcoin. There had to be a way, a better system of checks and balance on money outside of what's going on with banks and governments.
Interesting. So is there like one person or one group responsible, like the brainchild behind all this? Do you know?
So nobody knows. So this Satoshi Nakamoto, right, which is kind of, the name, the big name behind Bitcoin. Nobody knows if it's one single person or a group of individuals. And that actually is what makes, Bitcoin, as far as a cryptocurrency, to me, or even to a lot of the people that are following it, one of the best things behind making that a gold-backed system, right? Because it's decentralized. Nobody owns it.
Interesting. So where is this gentleman you mentioned? Where is this guy located?
Who
Nobody knows?
And it's probably, if it is, I heard one guy say, if it is actually a single person, hopefully he's dead. And because if governments were to find out who he was, they for sure would kill him.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I see what you're saying there. Okay. So then let's talk a little bit more as far as the application of using Bitcoin and how it can help put an end to this financial matrix that many people find themselves in, this cycle of getting into consumer debt where, on average, a third of a person's income is taken up by consumer debt. Another third of their income, maybe more depending on their situation, but a third of their income goes to pay the various taxes, income tax, sales tax, property tax, and all these different things. And so then what they make, they're actually left with a third of it to try to pay for their health care, maybe save for retirement, Social Security tax, Medicare tax, and then live their lives on like 1/3 of what their annual salary is. So if somebody makes like $75,000 per year, they think, oh, it's pretty good income. They're after the tax and then the consumer debt, they probably have like 25,000 like left over. Which is, again, when we talk about the third going to pay debt, I'm just talking about servicing the interest, like paying the interest, not even paying for the actual item. So this is a cycle people have found themselves in. And then we talk about like that third of income they have left, the government devaluing it because of all the machinations they pull. So tell us a little bit about how Bitcoin can help put an end to these things or protect somebody against all these things.
Okay. Well, so go back to 1971, right? Richard Nixon, the great, wonderful president that he was, and that's sarcasm. He did the world a favor. He took the whole world off of the gold standard, which means there was no longer a check and balance on money. So you think about the genius of the Constitution and the founding fathers, right? It was a check and balance on power. And having a gold standard was a check and balance on money. So meaning inflation and deflation can only go so far before it had to be checked based upon something that's of hard value. And when you look at 1971, so what happened is, right, so inflation starts to shoot up. And even the production of people continue to go up. But what did our wages do? They stayed very stagnant. The middle class back in the 60s, you could make $10,000 a year back then, and you were actually very well off financially as a middle class individual. I always use my grandfather as a great example. So what happened, right? And so that's obviously, right? So debt skyrockets because I can no longer keep up with my income. And so now I have to take out more debt, right? So, okay, my mortgage is, 4 times what I make, and I need a roof, for my kids. I needed this education. Well, education is skyrocketing, right? And so now I had to take out $100,000 loan to get an education. Of course, I need Cadillacs and, all the fancy cars. And I mean, what does a brand new Suburban even cost? I think they're like roughly $80,000, And so for somebody who's actually not even making 50, you're $100,000 in student loans, right? You got a couple of vehicles, this big mortgage. And so there's where, and anyway, so that's what that system has done to us as far as why we're in the debt, right?
But some of that, Brandon, wouldn't you agree that some of that has to come down to personal accountability? Like
it does.
Nobody's forcing somebody to buy an $80,000 Suburban or forcing them to buy, a certain size house. And I'm not like picking on any of those things specifically, right? Like none of them are like inherently bad. I'm just talking about like as a matter of affordability.
Yeah,
right. But like, so doesn't the financial matrix kind of like lure us into this consumerism? Like even just like the media and the advertising, like there's more, right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a biblical level, right? Sin nature has a little bit of greed to it, right? To where we want that next thing or that shiny object. And there's nothing wrong with it if it's earned or if it's done in a right manner. Mm-hmm. But in the same token, we are being strongly advertised and manipulated, by these governments and banks. So when you bring in a standard, so like a Bitcoin, what it forces is honest money, right? Honest money brings actually stronger economies. And I'm going to recommend a book in a minute, but read this, what sound money does. And all you got to do is study history of sound money. But sound money allows people to think about the long term and to save and invest more for the future. Saving and investing for the long run are the key to capital accumulation and the advance of human civilization. Sound money is also what allows trade, investment, and entrepreneurship to proceed on a solid basis, whereas unsound money, so fiat currency, throws these processes into disarray. Sound money is also an essential element of a free society as it provides for an effective wall against tyrannical government.
Well, I want to really dig in on that last part that you said, but that's a lot to unpack.
I'm sorry.
Well, listen, no, I mean, just with that last phrase, with everything going on right now with the political world and the election, and the coronavirus and all of the government intervention and all the government interference. I remember Chris Brady on an audio a long time ago about the government never waste a good crisis.
Here we are.
Every time there's a crisis, they use it as an excuse to take more and more control and take more and more freedoms away from the people. But I think when it comes down to like specifically what we're talking about with like monetary, the more they tamper with the government, the more they become tyrannical because the more control they have over people's lives there, right?
Absolutely. Power corrupts, right? And when there's no check or balance on power, and it's kind of what we're seeing. So I don't want to be, don't take this wrong, right? You and I both agreed Corona is a real deal, right? People are, I know somebody who just passed away from it, right?
Uh-huh.
And thankfully, she's a believer in Jesus, and so she's in heaven now. However, we're talking about something that has a 99.7% survival rate. Like, what the heck is going on? And to me, that's the bigger picture of this financial matrix. It should have crashed already a while ago. And here we now have perfect storm to where a crash was in a sense coming. And now these governments are able to kind of speed the crash up because now we're shutting down businesses. We're making people go bankrupt. Well, when we do that and call it the Corona, who doesn't have to take credit for what they actually did? These governments and banks. They don't want you to ever think it was their fault. And so when these foreclosures probably start happening in 2021, they're going to say, listen, this was the Corona. And I here as your friendly government, person, am here to help you. And so let me actually give you all this money and let me clear the path. Or, here's what's really happening. Those that caused it are just looking for more control, and they're making you believe that they're here to help.
Right. I couldn't agree more. 100%. 100%. So, I mean, I guess if you look at even like back in April, they passed this huge stimulus package. I want to say it was like $2.3 trillion or something like that. Well, guess what? They don't have that money. And at the time, they're going to print it out of thin air and they're going to raise taxes. And, at the time we were $25 trillion in debt. And then it was like over the course of a month, we went from 25 trillion in debt up to 27 trillion in debt. It's madness.
Yeah. So let me say,
they want to pass more.
Yeah. And sound money, right? If we had sound money, they wouldn't be able to print. They would have to actually come to you and ask permission. Say, okay, the economy's hurting, and here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to pass this stimulus package, but what that means is we're going to have to tax you. Well, all the people would say, no, I'll just go back to work, right? Mm-hmm. But when they can print, then they don't even have to ask permission, and the same thing with wars. What most Americans don't even realize at one particular point in time in recent history, we were in well over 100 different countries, right? Our military, and yet most of us can't name 5. Well, why don't they have to come to you? Why do they just do this? Because they don't have to come to you to ask permission. Imagine if you had sound money and a government actually had to come to the people and say, hey, you know what? We need to go to war with this particular country. And here's what it's going to take: a tax increase and your sons and daughters. Well, if that war was unnecessary to us, most of us say, nah, forget it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, you ain't taking my money, you ain't taking my kids. Just that simple. And that's what sound money produces. And then because we don't have sound money, this is why governments are able to kind of bend us over and do their thing.
Nice.
Sorry for the picture. If you have kids in the background, just send them to
Well, I see here a list of people who are watching us, and as far as I know, they're all Christians. Jennifer Lee says facts 100, 100, 100. So I think this is resonating with people. So
and as believers, right? And so we tend to stick to one verse as far as the root of all evil is the love of money. And, and this has nothing to do with the love of money, but guess what? The Lord also detests dishonest weights and measures, and there's multiple verses. I think money is something that we don't need to worship. However, it's something we need to be mindful of because even in our stewardship, it's hard to be a good steward and to truly be a neighbor and help a brother. A good friend of mine, Terry, and we were actually talking a while ago. We feel maybe the church has missed out on the widows. But it's hard to be somebody who does that when we could barely take care of ourselves. When we've allowed the government to take advantage of us financially, it's hard to take care of the widows and the orphans.
So, Brandon, say that this message is resonating with people who are watching this, and maybe they've got some money in the bank, and maybe they've got some insurance, and maybe they've got some investments in a 401k or a Roth IRA, something like that. But then they're kind of thinking to themselves, I'd like to kind of create this shelter as far as like, using maybe investing in Bitcoin. So, I mean, how do you, before they would even do that, like, how would you even use Bitcoin? Like, say, for example, like somebody bought some Bitcoin, how would they make transactions with that? Again, I'm clueless how it even works.
Not a whole lot of transactions are done entirely with Bitcoin yet. Now, there are transaction centers. There are, I believe, is Amazon one of them? But I think PayPal will do some Bitcoin transactions. But again, compare it kind of with gold. You and I, we don't do transactions with gold, right? There's a third party trusted source that is connected to a gold, like a Visa or a PayPal, if it were on that financial system. And so that is, in a sense, what companies behind the scenes are working on with Bitcoin. They will be these third party trusted sources that make the speed of transactions faster.
Okay.
And here's what's cool: because of a check and balance, if you and I are not able to trust that third party source, will we vote with our feet, right? We take our money somewhere else that we can trust as the third party source. So it helps create, I think, that real trust that's needed to have the checks and balances with our money.
Interesting. So how would somebody go about investing in Bitcoin? I mean, it just hit a high the other day. I saw that it reached 20,000. So, I mean, probably there's not a lot of like average Joes who are going to be able to buy an entire Bitcoin for 20,000. So I imagine they're sold in fractions. Like, how does that work exactly?
Sure. Well,
or at least maybe like a basic level overview.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me explain it this way, right? Investment versus savings in a sense, right? And that kind of turned me off from Bitcoin in the past is people looked at it as an investment, right? I watch all these people take credit cards and buy all this hoping to get rich. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe in get rich quick. I believe in earned wealth or even, good preservation. So even with gold, and the best way I've heard gold described is, if I'll use it, we're in hunting season. So if I shot a deer, right, and I'm not going to eat the whole deer here in this next week, I'm going to probably want to eat it throughout the course of the next year or two. Well, I put it in the freezer. Well, when I take that deer meat out of the freezer in the next year, I'm not mad it didn't multiply, right? An investment is a risk, a multiplier. A Bitcoin or gold is a savings for production in the future, right? So when you look at, how classical economics works, production, capital, savings, and investment, that gold is what allows you to actually invest into the future so that we can have production, capital, and actual savings.
Interesting. Okay. And that's, again, I don't know a lot about Bitcoin, but I think most people, they think about it as far as like investing. I had a client recently ask me, well, should they invest in Bitcoin because, it just hit its near high and it's basically like doubled in the last 3 months. But here's the thing. It just hit 20,000 for the first time since December 2017. Right. 3 years ago, it was right here. So if somebody was, so that's why I have a hard time looking at it as an investment when people ask me about that, because it's not investment. To me, it's speculation because, and I got the notes right here, December 17th, 2017, it peaked. And this is again, 3 years ago. It peaked at 19,783. Let's just say 20,000. And then in the course of 24 hours, it lost over 1/3 of its value, dropping below 14,000.
Yep.
So if you held Bitcoin back then when it was 20,000, you lost your shirt. So I think people are looking at it like too short-sighted. They're looking at, like 3 months ago, it was 10, 12,000. Well, guess what? A few years ago, it was way up here and it came down here and now it's up. Is it going to go back down? I don't know. That's why I look at it as if someone's going to talk about it as investment. To me, it's not, at least from what's been shown, it's not investment, it's speculation. So can you talk a little bit about that as more in depth, because you know more than me on this topic, as far as using it as a store of wealth versus an investment?
Okay. And so that's you raise an interesting point. And that's what I like to we have to quit thinking about it. If you understand money, quit thinking about it as an actual investment, as far as I'm going to put it here and take it out later and I'm going to be rich because of it, right? We have to get that thought out of our head. This is a medium of exchange, a store of value, so that in the future, it's a way of, and the way and how gold and silver is perceived is, this is a way of storing some of the fruits of my labor in something other than a fiat currency. I have notes here, right? Switching money where we park our labors for the future, a change of storage, right? So you're just parking the fruits of your labor in something that governments and banks can't manipulate. And I think kind of what we saw back in 2017, anytime something new comes out, I think like that, you're going to get a lot of dumb money. Right. I recently had a friend get a hold of me. We'll just call him Larry because that's his name. I actually tried to get him to meet with you because that was his thing. He was wanting to pay this guy money to give him the hot 5, cryptocurrencies he's going to get rich off of. And I'm like, that's just dumb. It's just not very sound financially or even good thinking. There's way better avenues. And so I would use it, or at least how I think, or how it was taught to me is, you have an investment hierarchy, and the very top is speculation. And that is people who invest to get rich. But the average Joe, the average middle class, you don't have the money to speculate, right? You work too hard to lose it. And so keep it at the very bottom, at the safest level in what's called gold, where you just taking little bits and just putting it there, for the future. You're not worried about 18,000, 15,000, or what it might be in the future. It's just little bits over time that'll build up that will benefit you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if we look at the price fluctuations, and again, for the people who are interested in investing or speculating, I'm looking at the price history right here. So October 2017, it was at 6,200. 2 months later, it went from 6,200 to 20,000. So these people are probably thinking, holy shit, I'm going to get rich off this.
Yep.
But then, as I mentioned, within a 24-hour period, it lost over 30% of its value, and it kept going down, down. And guess what? By February, it was back to 6,000. So in October, 6,000. By December, 20,000. 2 months later, February, back to 6.
Yep.
And so I wonder, like, how much the value.
When I started buying, it was in the 35 to 4,000 range.
Yeah. But that's why when I hear people like say to me when we're talking about their retirement and building like a solid plan, well, what about Bitcoin? It just like doubled in the last 3 months. Well, it's done that before and it's crashed again. And I mean, if you want to go ahead, but to me, that's speculation. I just posted something the other day, Brandon, and because I know that you liked it and you reshared it, where the quote was, nobody ever said it was a bad idea to sell at all-time highs, because we know we're supposed to buy low and sell high. But there's this little funny thing that happens with the investing world. It's called emotion. And so what does the average person do? The average person does it backwards. Like, oh man, Bitcoin's hot right now, let's buy in. And they end up buying in at 20,000. If it crashes back to 6, they panic, they freak out, they sell, and then they lose their shirts. So what's the proper mindset? Like, how should somebody approach this so they don't end up in that trap? Whether it's Bitcoin or the stock market, real estate, like it happens over and over and over, or people buying the hot stock tip and they end up buying it after it's already peaked. Like with Bitcoin specifically, how do we resist that urge to invest, because it's not investment?
Yeah, I think you said it best, right? Emotion. And Kiyosaki he's a hard writer on that, is as far as you can't have your emotions tied to that, right? And you have to learn to separate the emotion, and you have to use logic, which we're seeing right now that most people aren't applying. So when it comes to your finances, logic is key. And I think if you're going to bank on anything, the only thing 100% guarantee I can bank on is me, right? And what I'm able to do. And that's why I'm a big proponent of things like building your own business, right? And an entrepreneur. And then I really believe when it comes to the investment hierarchy, I like staying at the bottom, right? I work too hard for my money to take chances. And all right, so an entrepreneurship in a sense is a chance, but I can guarantee this, my work ethic. And then after that, find safe avenues. And this is where I believe savings accounts. I really believe in what you're doing with the life insurance industries, right? These are some of the safe avenues for your money. And then with what's left over, right, start looking into hard money, right? And helping. And when it comes to, you want to end the financial matrix, right? All of us do. And so we need to find a way to get back to sound money. And that's where you should research both gold and Bitcoin. Don't become fanatical about it, but don't be unaware of its value either, because as if we go back to hard money, to me, the wealth that, or the income that you're currently making in your business or your job is going to go further.
So would you recommend then that somebody who is interested in Bitcoin to then, view it as not an investment, not speculation, to view it as a store of wealth? And I
Yes.
mean, would you recommend them to maybe make like small regular purchases, like
Yep.
every month, every quarter, every year, something like that, and just like build a little,
Yeah.
little store of Bitcoin?
So let me give you a personal example.
Okay.
You know my sister, and
Yeah.
so she's looking at buying some life insurance, her and her husband, from you. But she's also curious about Bitcoin. And so she was asking me, because nobody's been able to answer this. I said, okay, well, whatever your budget is to put into something, right? And I know the price of the insurance she's looking to buy. I said, buy the insurance. With the money you have left over, buy that little bit of Bitcoin.
So would you say, like with investable money, to maybe do like 5% into Bitcoin and just do it regularly? And I don't mean like 5% of income. I mean, like, here's the amount we can invest, savings, investment, and like just put a little stash into Bitcoin regularly.
Yep. I would recommend, obviously, a regular basis. Make sure that you're taking care of one. You need to have an emergency fund,
Right.
you know.
You're talking about after all this other stuff is done, emergency fund, if you have a family, life insurance, maybe disability insurance, if it's not offered at your work,
Yep.
Targeted savings. Just have the foundation built first is what sounds like you're
Yes.
saying. Okay.
Yep. I would recommend that, because here's the thing, if something happens and you don't have those avenues in place, you start taking from areas where you shouldn't take it from.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you teach this in some of your seminars and stuff as well, right? When you don't take care of the first things first, the things that you need to save for the long haul, you start pecking away at because you didn't build the foundation first.
Absolutely. And that's the problem why so many people are behind, like even for retirement, because they try to invest and speculate before they save. And then during the economic downturns, not only do their investment accounts lose 30 or 40%, but that's also the time where people usually are either losing a job or getting their hours cut back. They don't have savings. So what do? They tap into their retirement account, but the value is already depleted at 30%. So when they sell, they're locking in their losses. But then on top of that, what they don't understand, they have to pay taxes, they have to pay penalties and fees, and it just sets them back even further. So if you do it the right way, the foundation first, like you should never have to take a step back. You should have the foundation through the insurances and savings and equity to be able to weather the storms, right? So you don't have to touch your long-term investments, whether it's like stock portfolios, whether it's real estate, whether it's Bitcoin, right?
Yep, I agree. And and there's a lot of good education out there, but a solid base is everything. And then start, looking at some things outside of that. And when it comes to like a Bitcoin, I think you can buy as much or as little as like $5, $10, which is what I like about it. When it came to gold, it was hard to find it in small chunks. And then even if you had a small chunk, where the heck were you going to store a little bit of gold, right? In my safe where I can't see it, the kids, my little Ziploc baggie,
All right. So we got we got Eric's question about what percentage would you kind of recommend. So you're talking about like just after the foundation's built, just a little tiny portion that you can kind of like store away for the long term. Let's see, we got a lot of comments here. We also have a few people on Zoom. So like, hey, Zoom people, pull up your chat if you have more. We got 4 chats here. Yes. So just our chats kind of mentioned in March how it dropped to under $5,000, and it's scary. Yeah, I talked about like just like a few months, like from October 2018, where it was 6,000 to December 2018. 2 months later, it was 20,000. And I talked about how it dropped back to 6 within 2 more months. But from December 2017 to December 2018, so one full year, it dropped from 20,000 down to 3,300. Like lost 75% of its value. So you're saying like this is something that you need to be, committed to for a long-term store of wealth, not these quick speculative, like get rich quick schemes.
Yeah. And that's the problem with America, right? We have a lottery mentality.
Hmm.
And let me tell you something about the lottery mentality. They go broke quick, because there is no long-term vision. And so you think about, what to me is the value of, a life insurance, a whole life insurance or policy. It's a long-term mindset towards your future wealth, or your future income. And that's really what we need to have when it comes to our money, a long-term view. Quit trying to get rich tomorrow. How do you go rich? Somebody said, how do you become wealthy? Right? I forget, but it takes years, and all of a sudden it suddenly happens. But how do you go broke? It's the same thing, right? It's just bad mindset over time, and then suddenly happens. If you start doing the right things on a regular basis, eventually wealth takes off for you, or at least, long-term income in that thought process.
It's interesting you bring that up, because there was a really nice illustration in a book called The Slight Edge, where it talks about the compound interest over time. It takes so long to build, but once you have that compounding, then it explodes. And all of a sudden you're either wealthy or successful in your business or whatever you're looking at. It's like, it goes back to that story. Like, what would you rather have? Would you rather have me give you $1 million right now? Or would you rather me give you a penny that doubled every day for a month? And if you took the penny, like 3.5 weeks into it, you're thinking, damn, this was stupid. Like, I don't have any money. But over those last 10 days of the month, that penny, I can't, it ends up, instead of being like the 1 million, the penny compound ends up being like 10 million or something like that. And that's how success is. But like you said, being broke or going broke is the same way. It's bad habits over time, or you're kind of like slowly digging the hole deeper, or like creating a hole in the bottom of the boat. And then all of a sudden, boom, the water comes rushing in and you sink.
Yep. And, and somebody could turn around a financial picture, man. This is in a matter of 2 years. I always say, if somebody's hurting financially, if you just follow principles for 2 years, you can be completely turned around. But most people can't see past 2 years, Ron. It's too long, to go.
Most people can't see past 2 weeks and what their next paycheck is.
Right. And the problem is, it's not just individuals. And, I'm going to sell out, one of the biggest airlines in the country. I won't tell you their name, but my wife recently retired from there.
I know who you're talking about then.
Yeah. So, right, they just had their biggest profit sharing year ever, right? They were so proud of it. 2 weeks into the coronavirus, they were asking for bailouts because they were failing financially. Now,
wow.
Like, but I mean, that's just right. There's no long-term storage or mindset of money and actually how it works. Everybody wants to spend now instead of just doing safe, small stuff over time.
Man, we got another good question in the chat. And we hear a lot about what's going on with the manipulations of money, as far as like there's a coin shortage, and there's all these rumors about going to like a cashless society and how much more control that's going to give to the wealthy elites. Even like, hey, you better get the COVID vaccine, because if you don't, we're going to, turn off your digital money. And if we're cashless, I mean, what do you do? Right. But so the question is, and maybe I'm taking a little bit far, maybe not, I don't know. But the question is, what do you guys think will happen to the tangible physical cash as we know of it today?
I think there will always be a place for tangible cash, right? But
God, I hope so.
Token, yeah, in the same, I mean, I got Benjamins in my wallet, right? I like them. However, there has to be, you still want it backed by something that's hard, right? A hard money. But you want it decentralized from government. And so, the government's going to go to one, but this is where something like a Bitcoin comes in, is they don't own it and they can't control it. And it's the people taking their money back in their hands. And in a lack of a better term, it's basically telling the government, F you with your vaccine and your control. We're in control of our money, no longer you.
Awesome. All right, let me check out the comments here. Looks like my wife logged on to watch. Hi, honey. Jennifer talked about, like, with the fluctuations of the price, it's scary because it can crash, just like in the 2000.com, when the internet companies, most of them crashed and burned.
Yep. And I don't want to see that happen again. If you actually look at this year, it's been quite a very good steady increase. Honestly, anything can happen.
Right.
But as the more and more people are actually voting that is actually going to be the future of a sound money.
That's incredible. Like I said, I just don't know enough about it. And if you really think about it, it's still kind of in its infancy.
Yep.
Really. I mean, I had a roommate back in like 2013, 2014 who told me about it. And he was younger than me. And I'm like, what, dude, what are you talking about? Like, and I mean, I kind of wish I would have bought some back then, but I'm also under the philosophy, like I don't invest in things that I don't understand.
Yep. And
You
that's a
know?
good philosophy. And this is why I recommend an education. Like you're going to have a ton of questions. And so here's a good book, by the way, The Bitcoin Standard. And it
Okay.
goes into the history of money.
Put that back up for the people who are watching. Just like bring it back a little bit. It's a little too close. All right. Yeah. And then who is the author on that?
So if you ask me to pronounce his name, I'll just spell it for you.
Okay.
Saifedean. That's his first name. Ammous.
Okay.
So, yep. Your guess is as
Now, is
good
that
as
like on Amazon or is that offered through the
Nope.
Life Leadership website or?
We'll get you that book. And to me, like that's a great education of sound money. It's actually where I got that quote I read to you earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And another good book right here, The Story of Blockchain. And you know, to me, yeah, you actually said it in a comment the other day, right? The blockchain is the future. And to me, what a blockchain ledger does is it allows us to check and see what's going on as far as transactions are concerned. And maybe in the future, voting will be connected to blockchain so we can actually check the honesty. Because right now, we can't check to see what the banks really are necessarily doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the video I did the other day, if people understood what was going on through fractional reserve banking, if I did that to a friend, if I did that to you, you'd come punch me in the face.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I get Brandon. Most people don't get that. Most people don't, realize. And I talked about this in my video last week on last week's Wednesday video. If the bank has $100,000 worth of deposits from its customers, it can then turn around and loan out $1 million. So I'm just using small rounded off numbers for just an example. But effectively, what they're doing is they're creating $900,000 out of thin air that us consumers have to pay back to them with interest. So it's money that they create out of thin air that we have to give back to them, and we have to pay it back with interest. That doesn't sound like a level playing field to me at all.
That's definitely a scam.
Yeah.
But it's a legalized scam through government, right, and banking systems working together. And this is why sound money is so important. Because let me go back to my grandfather. I remember when he showed me his first General Motors check, right? And you're talking in the 60s. I want to say it was like less than $1 an hour he was making.
Mm-hmm.
However, he had a stay-at-home wife of 2 kids. He paid off his mortgage rather quickly, and he had virtually no debt. Versus people making 2 incomes have a hard time doing that. And why? Like our wealth should actually get greater over time, but it's actually decreased because of this money manipulation. Now, those few elites, so you look at governments, they're always first in line for that money. Well, they get wealthier off it. Us at the end of the line get poorer off it.
Yeah. We talk about this stuff and I get so fired up, and anybody watching this, they probably got to turn down their volume every time I reply to you because I'm yelling. But in addition to what you just said, and we probably got to wrap this up because we're going a little bit longer than expected, but it's been a good conversation. But just in addition to what you just said, I mean, isn't part of it consumerism as well? Because think about all the gadgets and technology and stuff that we have today, like the cell phones and the flat screen TVs and, subscriptions to Netflix and this toy and that toy, which back then it was a simpler world, simpler life. People weren't spending money on that. But that comes back, kind of like that first step in the financial matrix. We're constantly bombarded with the advertising and the consumerism. Like, you got to get this or you're not as good as your friends. And then, you end up going into debt and it's crazy what.
It is. And, a big part of this is we got to obviously cut that out and get your finances under control, because when you do have your finances under control, because I lived on both sides. You and I remember we met in a coffee shop. You and I both lived on the broke side, and now we're on the more advanced side. And it is a different world. It is like we just got off a 2-week vacation. and we went to Florida, and we did everything while we were down there, and all the excursions, and it cost a pretty penny, but it was nice to be able to just say yes, right? Because you took those 2 years to put your finances in the right spot, so you can start doing the things you want to do. And maybe this is where Facebook comes in and stuff. Quit caring about what your neighbor is doing, or what your friend has, because at the end of the day, when you're hurting financially, they're not going to pay your bills.
Right.
You have to do what's right for you, and everybody's picture looks different, and this is why a sound financial education, and even sound things to do with your money. Like, I would rather live without cable if it meant affording things like a life insurance policy, right? But there's families who forgo stuff like that because they can't give up the $200 subscription to the boob tube. It just makes no sense. Like, put your priorities in order so that you can live a good quality life, especially as your kids start to get older.
Yeah. Well, and it's a lot of people who, whether it's, on Facebook or whatever, they've got the, the vacations or the cars or the houses or the toys, whatever. A lot of that's not even theirs. It's, most of it's financed with huge levels of debt, and they have no savings. They have no retirement. Like, that's another big thing, people saving for retirement. Like, they haven't hardly done it. A lot of people not at all. And then they get behind the 8 ball, but they had all this stuff. But again, that kind of goes back to the compounding interest. Like, people, maybe for 10 years, from age 25 to 35, maybe they sacrifice and they don't get that stuff. But so later on, they can have even more, and they can own it, and they can have financial security and not be in debt up to their eyeballs, So, man, awesome conversation, dude. Give us just like as we part ways here, just your one last thought of wisdom as it pertains to Bitcoin, and maybe what somebody can do to get started and utilize it.
Sure. Well, here's what I'd recommend, right? First of all, turn off your TV and start diving into the history of money, and governments, because it is, to me, vitally important. Use this downtime that we're having during the Rona to figure out how we've been taking advantage of all these years. So I would order that book today, and even get a Coinbase account. That's what I use. And just start doing a little bit over time, just so that you can at least start seeing it. And if you reach out to me, actually, I got a pay-per-view I can send you, actually, by Orrin Woodward and Chris Brady, and I think they do a great job of actually explaining a lot of what we just talked about. They got some nice slides and stuff like that, just to give you a better education view. Because here, I think we're at a pivotal point in history, Ron. And if we don't get educated on this, we are going to move more towards slavery and government control. Versus, if we get educated on this, we're going to move over here towards more freedom, right? And to me, that's where I want to go, right? I got 4 kids whose foundations I need to protect. And if they go on and have families and grandchildren, like, that's right, that's my lineage. And I need to make sure that I protect the foundation for their freedom.
Oh, man. Awesome. So where would somebody go to like buy Bitcoin if they wanted to? Like, hey, I just want to make a small purchase, like their app you can download, or like a company to go through? Like, what would you recommend?
So Coinbase actually has, just go to your app store on your
Right.
Google.
That's what made me think of it when you mentioned that. That's what I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So
that's like an app. Okay.
Yeah. There it is. There's all my financial apps. So see right there, Coinbase.
Okay.
And just go right there. You can create an account and just do little bits. Like I said, this isn't something you need to be extravagant and put, 1,000, 5,000, whatever. Just little bits over time, right? And set up your foundation.
Dude, thank you so much. I've learned a ton from this conversation. I think that all of our viewers have as well, just based on the comments and on the feedback. And you got time for one more question? Another one just came through the chat here. I just saw it.
Man.
Okay. I mean, at the risk of being too long-winded, but as long as you're not in a rush to go right this second. Another question that came in: what are your thoughts on the other digital currencies? Because there is a lot. I think there's like Ethereum. Is that what it's called? Why is Bitcoin the one to go with?
All right, and I'll tell you exactly why. So somebody actually texted me the other day and say, "Hey, what did I think of XRP?" And I was like, that's actually a good question. Let me ask my good friend, who's very knowledgeable when it comes to money and all that we just talked about.
Okay.
He said, and this was, I asked him, I just said, "Hey, what do you think of XRP?" He said, "Controlled and built for banks. It's the enemy. Exactly the opposite of what BTC, which is Bitcoin, is trying to do." He said it might go up for a while and have people make some money off it, but it is not truly distributed and decentralized. It's got the same fatal flaw as all of the alternate coins. It's centralized and identifiable control. So remember, we're talking about sound money, which means we want something that's decentralized and distributed, right? Or easily
Interesting. Interesting. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right, brother. Well, listen, man, thanks for dropping your knowledge on all of us. We'll have to do like maybe a few months down the road, because you and I did one of these conversations, gosh, it's probably been like 6 months now, and I said we're definitely going to get back together and do this. We'll have to do another one soon, just about more in depth about like Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies and things of that nature. And yeah, we got a lot of people saying great info. Thanks, guys, like both on the chat here in Zoom, and also like I'm on the Facebook app looking at the comments on the live video, because it looks like a lot of people joined us there. So thanks for spending the time. Thanks for dropping your knowledge, and appreciate it, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you as well.